This conference signals the culmination of a 3-year effort from 2017 to 2020 by the Institute of Historical Research to upgrade its national and international role in the forging of a digital future for humanities and particularly history, an effort implemented by the Anαβαθμίδες project as part of the Partnership Agreement for Development Framework 2014-2020. Now, the Anαβαθμίδες project started in June 2017 under the direction of Professor Taxiachis Kollias and ends this December. Its total budget amounts to 8,300,000 euros. The main targets of the project are the constant development of digital tools for historical research, an upkeep and exploitation of documentation infrastructure, and the development and use of new archival infrastructure. A vast array of deliverables were prepared within these 3 years: digital applications, archival repositories, scientific articles, and research studies, e-books, workshops, and conferences. Apart from the 46 in-house personnel, we had the opportunity to collaborate with 14 postgraduate researchers, 15 PhD candidates and postgraduate students, software developers, and technology experts. The main asset of the project is the allocation of the budget to mostly external personnel. In the last years, research funding in the humanities has been curtailed, leading to less and less new research positions. The actual wages of the researchers have also been curbed, making self-funding impossible, and internal grants for researchers to attend conferences or workshops are scarce. Moreover, national and European policies posit and encourage specific direction for research in the humanities. These are the Anαβαθμίδες people who worked hard to implement it, and we all hope that new developments in state and European policy will present specific opportunities and challenges for the Institute, which can be summarized as follows. Firstly, external funding and the appointment of younger researchers becomes more and more an absolute necessity rather than a priority. Secondly, engagement with digital humanities and stakeholders at large as a partner with a uniquely placed perspective of Greek and European cultural heritage is also rapidly becoming necessary. Now, summing up with the main targets of the Anαβαθμίδες project, we would like to stress its strengths, and at the end of the conference, we will come back with its weaknesses. Now, the main assets, it's first, the project aimed at developing innovative and viable digital applications and included the consolidation of digital development in the Institute for Historical Research, the harnessing of existing digital infrastructure, the reinforcement of existing tools for historical research, and the production of original historical studies by reinforcing, improving, and updating existing digital applications, platforms, and databases that have been implemented in the Institute for Historical Research in the past years. Second, it engaged in a systematic exploration of trends in the digital humanities nationwide and internationally, particularly in the fields and data corpora on which the Institute's researchers have a long-standing experience in handling and international recognition in exploitation. Anavαθμίδες was so structured in order to serve as a pilot application field for related new digital trends. 3, a systematic exploration of possible further networking of the Institute of Historical Research with other Greek and international scientific and cultural institutions, with an eye towards implementing research projects in the humanities, cultural studies, and cultural heritage utilization, with continuous training of research personnel in new capabilities and support in preparing and submitting relevant projects for funding, and by creating a series of advanced digital tools necessary for historical research, documentation, and diffusion of results. Now, all the results of the work achieved are open access. The project also included new digital and print publications of new series of historical sources, databases, and novel historical research. Such publications are also accompanied by portals, dynamically updated web pages, and e-book digital publishing. The innovative character of the project is apparent in the digital infrastructure for the humanities that will be instituted, forcing an end to the sporadic and piecemeal approach that has been so far adopted, both within the Institute for Historical Research, but also by other institutions within the humanities. Thus, the project will engage in an innovative effort to upgrade the entirety of Greek historical and historiographical production and competitiveness. This innovative strategy is specifically designed to take advantage of the competitive advantage of the Institute for Historical Research as one of the foremost centers of study and research of Greek history and culture. Thank you. And we will have a 5-minute break now, and we will pass to the first session in 5 minutes, okay? Thank you. Our first session is dedicated to networks. I suppose Dr. Sofia Zoubaki is here. I can't see her. Yes, she's here. So Dr. Sofia Zoubaki is a research director in the section of Greek and Roman antiquity of the Institute of Historical Research. She is the author and co-author of 60 books and many articles on the prosopography, epigraphy, and social dynamics of Roman Greece. She has been working on various databases and digital projects over many years. This evening, she will present her project on Roman and Italian businessmen in Greece, a digital mapping of mobility and economic networks in the Mediterranean in the Hellenistic and Roman period. Dr. Zoubaki, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the digital floor. Good evening, everyone. As I'm the first speaker, I would like to express my thanks to the organizing committee and congratulate them and the director of the Institute of the Historical Research for the courage to undertake this endeavor in these difficult times. I would also like to extend my thanks to Professor Kollias, who paved the way for the implementation of the program Anavαθμίδες, part of which is the project I'm going to present.
Και ξεκινάς πατώντας εδώ.
Okay, I hope now you see my PowerPoint. My project is entitled Mobility and Economic Migration in the Mediterranean, Italiot Greek and Roman Businessmen in Greece. Before I proceed to the presentation of its topic, I will start by taking you to have a look at the Mediterranean basin and remind you that it always invited mobility of people living around it like ants or frogs around a pond, as Plato described it. The project examines mobility of private Italians and Romans within the Mediterranean, more concretely, mobility from the west to the east in the Hellenistic and early Roman period. These people who moved with their own initiative and not on the basis of a planning or an order of the central Roman government form a trade diaspora, a term coined in order to define an overseas commercial network centered on its members' shared geographical or ethnic origin. Mobility to the opposite direction, namely Greek presence on the Italian peninsula, is attested as early as the Mycenaean period and reached its peak with a Greek colonization of the 8th to 6th century BC. Cultural and emotional links of Greek colonies with metropolitan Greece remain strong and intense, as is evident from their victories in pan-Hellenic athletic contests, their numerous votive offerings in sanctuaries, and their presence in the most famous oracles, such as those of Delphi and Dodona. However, economic activities in the East on the part of Greek colonists were limited, and on the part of Romans are not attested at all before the 3rd century BC. It was only during the 3rd century when internal evolutions on a political, social, and economic level in Rome encouraged an economic outreach of Romans and Italians. From the 3rd century BC, people defined as cives Romani or Italici spread gradually en masse outside Rome and Italy in every part of the Roman world, from Spain to Asia Minor, and from the Danube to North Africa, as you see on the map. The earliest attestations of Romans and Italians abroad are encountered on the western coast of Balkan and especially on Greek mainland and the islands of the Ionian and the Aegean Sea. The motivation of their mobility to the east could vary, but above all it was their search for profit. This manpower aimed at profit opportunities which were offered in Greek land, where, with few exceptions, the majority of productive forces were exhausted by the long-lasting preceding period of wars, which led to the drying up of economic and human resources. The activities which they carried out and the range of their economic success differed from place to place depending on local natural resources, geographic location, and the general prevailing circumstances. The presence of Westerners in the East increased in time and ranged from mobility to migration, from temporary to permanent settlement, from commercial transactions to investments, and from cultural interaction to acculturation. So, the goal of the project is to examine in a systematic way Roman economic expansion to Greece, namely Italians and Romans who settled in the polis of Greek mainland and the adjacent islands. For the implementation of the objectives of this project, a digital platform has been launched where the research output is going to be offered in open access to the scholarly community. This tool aims to contribute to the study of the groups of Westerners in various regions of Greece to shed light on their relations with the host communities, to their occupations and their networks wherever it's possible. The human capital, which rushed from the west to the east, full of enthusiasm for profit opportunities, should have been enormous if one takes into account, for example, the figures of Ephesian Vesper's victims. Ephesian Vesper is the slaughter of Italians and Romans in towns of Asia Minor and on Delos, which was ordered by the king of Pontus Mithridates VI in 88 BC. The numbers of victims range, according to various ancient writers, from 80,000 to 150,000. The numbers are of course not accurate, but they offer an idea of the multitude of the Italian residents in Greek polis of the East. After Sulla's victory over Mithridates, the migration wave to the East increased again, so that Caesar, about 4 decades later, was pushed to take measures in order to limit it. Numerous traces of the presence of these people and their activity have been preserved in sources of various categories. It is therefore imperative to systematize the numerous sources which form the groundwork of our research. Our project examines primarily written sources and complements the data derived from them with evidence derived from archaeological relics. The project aspires to systematize for the first time numerous written sources, namely dozens of literary texts and thousands of inscriptions. Few numismatic finds, which are evaluated as important for the research of the topic, as well as numerous archaeological finds, are also taken into account. The website has been designed in order to offer to the user an insight into the world of the Westerners who settled permanently or temporarily in various regions of Greece, to introduce these individuals and shed light on their activities. So, backbone of this project is a prosopographic database which is constantly fed and aims at registering every individual who is mentioned in written sources and can be identified with certainty or with good reasons as Roman or as a person of Italian origin. So far, the material of a part of Greek mainland, the islands of the Ionian Sea and the Cyclades has been already registered. It is the yellow part of the map. The primary sources where each individual is mentioned and are given in full bibliographic records. For the epigraphic sources, we give links to widely used websites and other digital platforms with relevant content, for example, the Hewlett-Packard Epigraphic Database. This will allow communication and complementarity within the increasingly evolving field of digital humanities. Additional bibliography and commentary attempt to offer a synthesis of the data known for each individual. Using any term of search, the user can navigate in the digital prosopography. Further, a visualized tool, an interactive map, displays all registered individuals, imprinting clearly the content of the database, mainly the place of origin and the place of attestation in Greece of each individual. So the maps allow visualizing various networks of moving or migrating Romans and Italians. A key benefit of this digital infrastructure is, of course, the possibility of continuous improvement and completing of the registered material. Published studies on the topic, which are offered here, give an idea of the synthetic studies which can be inspired by the material of the project and its combination with archaeological evidence. A detailed bibliography facilitates the user's search for more information. A look at this bibliography, here I show you just a selection. A look at the bibliography will show that the general framework of this research has been already sketched by brilliant scholars, above all the great Jean Hatzfeld, whose two fundamental studies are here marked in red. However, there are several factors that dictate a reconsideration and reappraisal of the topic. New research tools and methods, progress in informatics and digital humanities, new epigraphic and archaeological finds, scholarly progress in specialized fields of research have accumulated important new knowledge as well as new perspectives for analysis and have clearly demonstrated the need for an interdisciplinary approach to this multifaceted and multi-level topic. So about 1 century later, after Jean Hatzfeld's work, new epigraphic material in some cases modifies or supplements the picture. For example, the numerous new epigraphic finds from the excavations of Messene, Peloponnese, the excavations are conducted by Professor Petros Themelis, or stray epigraphic finds, such as this inscription from Philippi, which serves here as the background of our picture. Moreover, the fundamental work which has been conducted in the last decades on Roman onomastics in the Greek East, as well as the remarkable progress of research on the field of prosopography, are to be taken into serious account, as both prosopography and onomastics form basic tools for an in-depth study of social history. It is further imperative to examine the rich, new, and older archaeological material under the light of the questions arising from the new approach of this topic. For example, numerous Italian amphoras have been found in wrecks. Here you see the finds from a wreck between Ithaca and Kefalenia in the Ionian Sea. Amphoras are especially important because they indicate trade connections. Imported artifacts from towns such as Gitana in Epirus or Dimokastron, Epirus again, show that archaeological finds will emerge as an important tool for the examination of commercial and cultural relations between West and East. So there will be an innovative, comprehensive examination of the topic. The evidence which has to be taken into account is therefore huge. Systematization through a digital infrastructure can serve as a tool of management of the huge amount of data, allowing the extraction of information, but also the combination and comparison of the evidence. This is necessary in order to study the topic in broad regions and in its various aspects. It also facilitates synthetic studies which can take advantage of the open access results of the project. The importance of this research lies in the significance of the role of Italians and Romans in social and economic life, even in the shaping of a new physiognomy of the polis of Greek East, given the mutual impact between the host communities and the foreign residents. Therefore, the project aspires to serve as a research basis, as a pool of evidence, as well as a nucleus that will enable extending research in regions beyond Greece and inspire and support further investigations. So further investigations based on the systematized material of the digital project can address questions of mobility, migration, integration of foreign social elements into local societies, investment of foreign capital in local economies, profit opportunities through exploitation of natural resources, economic networks, intercultural relations, individual and collective identities, etc. All these are burning issues for modern societies, now are projected on a much earlier historical period. As it seems, such issues were always burning in the course of time, and it is no coincidence that a poem written by an itinerant journalist in South Africa in the early 20th century, Lance Fallow, is entitled Cives Romani, Roman citizens. It is dedicated to people of the white race who pursued high profit through the exploitation of Africa's rich natural resources. With this poem, Lance Fallow alluded to the fact that early 20th century was not the first time in human history that people in such a rush to search for the corn of plenty left for remote and unknown lands, from where they led their harvest home. It is expected that our digital project will offer food for thought and contribute to realizing some of the generative causes and the timelessness of these phenomena. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zoubaki. Thank you very much. And allow me to remind you that at the end of this session, we will be able to have a discussion, and you can send your questions in the Q&A questions and answers. Our next speaker is Dr. Kostas Tabakis. Dr. Tabakis is an associate researcher in the section of Neo-Hellenic research of the Institute of Historical Research, and his research interests include the history of science and technology in 18th to the 20th century Greek space, and the history of the relations of science and religion and science and literature. His paper tonight is titled Orthodox and Unorthodox Digital Humanities, the experience of mapping the historical dialogue between Orthodox Christianity and science. Dr. Tabakis, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening from me. So, my name is Kostas Tambakis, and my presentation today will be on a bit different track from the previous one. I will focus on my experiences as a historian of science coming into the digital humanities through two specific projects, which I will also discuss a bit. I believe this is a very common route for historians to get into digital humanities, in the sense that most historians have a specific research or projects they want to tackle, and they choose tools from the digital humanities to do so, rather than starting from the top down, being enamored with the theory and the practice of digital humanities and saying, I will apply this to my research. Both approaches are valid. I'm just stating that I believe the first one to be more common. I'm not an expert on digital humanities. So my initial non-expert opinion of digital humanities, when I first came into contact with them 10 years ago, was skeptical. This is not to say that I had any doubt about the power and applicability of digital tools. None so ever. My own discipline, history and technology of science, history of technology and history of science, has shown that any new tool, any new artifact, from a hammer to a computer to a spaceship, changes profoundly the way we learn things about the world. I firmly believe that digitization, connectivity, and informatics, generally and broadly understood, have changed and will continue to change the way we do everything, history and the humanities included. My skepticism is rather on whether this is enough to talk about a new autonomous discipline called digital humanities. I am skeptical about the claim that the totality of all digital tools is something more than the sum of its individual parts. After a while, my feeling working within the digital humanities was the one shown in the picture. If you are familiar with intellectual history of the Middle Ages, you will recognize the image of the scholar which is beyond the sublunar world into the eternal universe, seeing God and so on and so forth. This was my impression. I felt like I had popped my hand to a new dizzying world. Now, the first digital humanities project I helped design and then worked on was Project Narcissus, Nature and Religion in Southeastern European Space. It was funded by the Aristia programs. Those that are familiar with the Greek scheme of funding, these were usually 3-year long programs with budget around 150,000 euros. It did last for 3 years. Its goal was to gather in an online database, among others, but its main goal was to gather in an online database all textual sources written in Greek, broadly understood, on the relationship between Orthodox Christianity and the study of nature from the 4th century onwards. The main research was carried out by 5 researchers whose work was allocated chronologically. So each researcher undertook to find all relevant primary sources in a specific period. Myself, I worked on the period from the 19th century to the mid-20th century, more or less. It was a labor-intensive project, and as you can well imagine, there was a host of epistemic and historiographical decisions to make. What counts as Orthodox Christianity in the 4th century, when we actually don't have an Orthodox Christianity yet? What type and kind of text would count as a source? How to establish a useful and usable periodization? What would be the criteria of relevance and inclusion to the database, and so on and so forth? I mention these because they had crucial consequences on how the database was set up, which was fundamentally to be an online open access database. The end result was a corpus of 600 or so entries that spanned the whole of the duration. The sources were of varied lengths and formats, from fragments to manuscripts to books to textbooks and so on and so forth. But other than that, they were fairly homogeneous. We were talking about texts in one way or another. To catalog those, we settled on those that we settled on a model which I non-expertly call, and I happily submit for your approval, the glorified Excel approach. That means that we created an online database from scratch, which was to be simple in its operation by design, and the end result was what you can see here. This is a snapshot of the online database. I'm not, let's say, courageous enough to try and actually use a link in a Zoom discussion. I do not want to anchor the gods of technology in any way, shape, or form. So this is what you can see when you access our database. As you can see, entries can be searched either by year or by any string of text. The database recognizes two types of entries, a lemma about a specific text or a biography. And other than that, there are no advanced filters or complex ontologies, again by design. Here is an example of each entry. Now perhaps the glorified Excel term makes more sense. As you can see, the basic conception of the online database was heavily influenced by how we used to do bibliographies and codexes. It was mostly focused on the online aspect and on the ease of use. Remember that we started working on this in 2012, which seems very close, but technology-wise can be quite distant. And this is how we implemented it. I must say that it fulfilled its role. It was light, it was easy to create, and it was easy to operate. The second project I would like to present very briefly came right after the first, and in many ways it was the evil twin of the first project. Project SOW, Science and Orthodoxy Over the World, was a much larger international project with a budget an order of magnitude greater than the Aristia project. One of its main goals, not the only one, but one of its main goals was the creation of an online database which would include all recent sources of any type, blogs, papers, books, videos, interviews, whatever, dealing with the relationship between Orthodox Christianity and science in all major languages of Orthodoxy. This means Bulgarian, English, French, Georgian, German, Greek, Romanian, Russian, Serbian, and Ukrainian. This was a very labor-intensive project, which had 11 dedicated researchers from 5 different countries working specifically on this. I was one of them. The work was allocated via the language of the source. And this was a decision partly dictated by the digital humanities tools we were using, as you will see. The design of the database, which I will show in a bit, required long and heated discussions on how it could or should be done. The same scholar would write in multiple languages, a scholar that we were interested in finding his work, or a specified text or specific text would be translated in multiple languages. Since we didn't know the field before starting, we didn't know the number of scholars or the actual people that would have worked in this field, it was impossible to allocate work in the researchers working on SOW by scholars, and so track a specific bibliography in different languages. So we went through using language as our primary heuristic tool. In the end, SOW database ended up including almost 4,000 entries, mostly textual, but also visual, audio, and others. And to implement it, we followed what I will again non-expertly call the nuclear screwdriver option, which means I think we over-engineered the database. If this setup seems vaguely familiar, it is because its base engine is the same used by the National Library of Greece in its Ephemeris project. It was developed by Altsol and based on a software called Reasonable Graph. As a tool, it is way more powerful than we need it, and I think way more powerful than anyone would need. This is why I call it the atomic screwdriver. It can classify and present and relate any kind of information in any shape or form and present the results with any depth or filtering necessary. Working on such an environment was challenging because one had to learn to ignore or focus on specific part of the database. And I mean the part of the database as it was being constructed that we were called to fill. Using such a powerful digital humanities tool also forced us very specifically to consider questions of ontology, manifestations of sources in different contexts, as well as the role of categories as normative rather than descriptive tools. The actual filters, you can see two of them that can be used to organize the results, can be seen here. So we have, you can search via entity, categories and subcategories which were programmatic in the project, authors, keywords, and so on and so forth. All entries were in English and included biographies, as you can see here. This is a typical entry. So the second project was much more complex to design and to implement, and it offered a very different experience, both as a researcher and as someone who is called to operate this. And it's still online, of course. I don't want to speak for long. I would like to present some of my conclusions now that I have worked with digital humanities tools for almost a decade. As you may have noticed, I have been careful to speak about digital humanities tools and not about digital humanities in general. I am still not convinced that digital humanities, as it's sometimes presented as a distinct, new, autonomous field, can justify such a strong epistemic position. For example, I'm not yet convinced that the advances in computational linguistics, for example, or in using machine learning algorithms to decipher ancient manuscripts can be applicable or useful to historiography. Not that the results are not useful in historiography, they are very, very much so. The actual tools and methods developed to do these things. However, if we can speak of a digitized history or digital history that is informatics and digital tools in historiography, then I am a firm believer in their use, importance, and utility. I believe that a discussion of what a digitized history or a digitally enabled history can be is late in appearing across the whole of the discipline and should go beyond organizing, for example, things I have seen in my field, Twitter conferences, virtual lectures, or online database. There is still much work to be done, and if history does not, let's say the community of historians does not take into consideration that it needs its own specific tools, we will be lagging behind. Secondly, my prolonged encounter with the digital humanities tools convinced me of what a well-known book in my field, in the history of technology, has called the shock of the old, not of the new, of the old. I propose that we should take into consideration that most historians, unless working in a very resource-rich environment or aiming specifically to do so, when confronted with the demands of a project, will tend to try and recreate older ideas in a new way, as we did in our first project. Researchers will gravitate naturally towards things they know and will try to step up from right there, rather than try and learn any new possible advanced in the digital humanities fields. any call for the use of digital humanity tools in history must do something more than enthusiastically extol its virtues and its possible triumphs for scholarship. On a related note, digital humanities bring us face to face with the demands of the new. And this, I believe, is a big benefit for the historical community. New tools impose by necessity new ways of thinking about all problems. At least so it was for me and the team I worked with. The mere realization of the power of metadata for historical research is humbling and terrifying. In Greek historiography, apart from some of the projects that we will see in this conference and some others, I have yet to see a network analysis of authors, sources of references, for example, especially in my field, in the 19th and 20th century. As digital humanities projects become more common, I expect that individually, every historian will have to confront his epistemic foundations. However, to do so, there is still a lot of work to be done on the archival level, especially in spaces like Greece. Digitization of sources may not be in vogue anymore, like it was 6 or 7 years ago globally, but huge amounts of archives remain undigitized. Digital humanities cannot work without digitized primary sources. We cannot have metadata if we don't have digital data. Finally, and perhaps this was personally my most crucial realization, the use of digital humanity tools requires a great amount of tacit, practical, what we could call street-level knowledge. In many cases, researchers and scholars working a mere few meters or a few kilometers away from each other have to rediscover for themselves what their colleagues down the road or in the next office already know, because they have done a similar project in the past, or they have confronted a similar problem in the past. This is a kind of knowledge that is not usually found in textbooks or discussed in papers and conferences. I believe that there is a need for a sustained circulation of ideas on the digitally enabled, digitized, whatever term you think is appropriate, history, which would enable scholars from all historical fields to be able to locate colleagues who could help them with the implementation of a project and to identify what has been done and what is being done by whom and where. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and leave you with a 14th century manuscript illustration of God, the geometer creating the firmament.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tabakis. And our next speaker now is Dr. Helen Gardikas Katsiadakis. Okay. Dr. Katsiadakis was the director of Modern Greek History Research Center of the Academy of Athens. Emerita now, her research interests cover the political and social history of 19th and early 20th century Greece. Between 2008 and 2017, she represented the Academy of Athens in DARIA, Digital Research Infrastructure for the Arts and Humanities, and she coordinated DIAS, which is the Greek Digital Research Infrastructure for the Arts and Humanities. In other words, Dr. Katsiadakis is one of the pioneers in the field in Greece. Dr. Katsiadakis, please.
Thank you very much. May I share my screen? Oh, here, yeah. So there we are. First of all, good evening. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this most interesting three-day event on what has been accomplished by the Greek historians communities by using digital tools, services, and methods in their research. Although the emphasis of the conference is on the use of tools, my presentation is about a a more wide-ranging initiative, that of a research infrastructure. One that brings together and enables the interaction of researchers with their resources and tools and services in a more comprehensive and socially interacting space. So in the 15 minutes that I have at my disposal, I will talk about the Greek digital research infrastructure for the humanities and its usefulness to historians. I'm sorry. An example of such a research infrastructure could be a library with its stacks of books, its printed or handwritten catalogs and record cards, and its reading room. A large single space in which readers, individual researchers, work each on their individual project with no sharing either of resources or of ideas or of scientific output. According to the definition of the European Commission, research infrastructures are facilities that provide resources and services for research communities to conduct research and foster innovation. They can be used beyond research, for example, for the production for education or public services, and they may be single-sited, distributed, or virtual. They include major scientific equipment or sets of instruments, collections, archives, or scientific data, computing systems and communication networks, and other research and innovation infrastructure of a unique nature, which is open to external users. This means that according to the European Commission, and this is a prerequisite for European funding, research equipment, data, and results must be made available to the research community beyond the organization that runs the infrastructure. So according to this new definition, a digital research infrastructure is a virtual space in which people, resources, and tools and services come together in a collaborative and functional virtual research environment. The phrase functional virtual research environment refers to both structural and semantic interoperability. The current European research infrastructure ecosystem is a project-based and therefore a relatively unstable one in a shifting landscape in which projects merge into larger initiatives and new infrastructures emerge, mainly thematic infrastructures, depending on specific research needs. In this slide, the top row represents overarching mergers of underlying infrastructures. The column on the left represents the Greek landscape, with Apollonis having emerged out of the fusion between Daria Giardias, which is the infrastructure for the arts and humanities, and Clarin L, which is the Greek language technology infrastructure. The middle column depicts a European picture with SOC, which stands for Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud, combining work from both Daria EU and Clarin on a European scale. It is, in a sense, the continuation of Parthenos with a very important and game-changing addition of social sciences. And the bottom right corner is devoted to two of the major European thematic infrastructures, Ariadne for archaeology and ECHRI for Holocaust studies, that is for history. Now, what we observe when we zoom in on the Greek landscape is that the Greek national infrastructure evolves alongside the European one. The preparatory phase of the European infrastructure, Daria EU, lasted from 2009 to 2011. It was then that the original consortium was set up. Like in many other European countries, Greece went through its preparatory phase between 2010 and 2011. And that was when the initial network of partners named DIAS was formed. Daria EU was established as a legal entity in 2014, and that was when the construction phase began. Similarly, the construction phase of the Greek project DIAS lasted from 2013 to 2015. From then on, the European Daria participated in larger projects, Parthenos between 2015 and 2019, and then since 2019 in an ongoing project named SOC, Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud. In a similar manner, Apollonis, which was produced out of the merger between Daria DIAS and the Greek Clarin, began as a project in 2017 and is ongoing. Now, what Daria DIAS does. As I said, Clarin focuses specifically on language technology, and Daria DIAS is interested in arts and humanities in general. It doesn't prioritize specific humanities disciplines over others. However, it is being largely used already by archaeologists and literary experts and linguists. Historians, however, have also started increasingly using the infrastructure for their research. Speaking about this infrastructure, currently its main activity areas are resource registries for the humanities, tools and services for the humanities, guidelines for standards and best practices, training and education workshops, publicity and dissemination activities. One of the key services of the infrastructure is its registries. Using a tool developed by Athena Research Center, a team of experts from the Academy of Athens, the University of Athens, and the Athens School of Fine Arts have developed and continue developing a comprehensive registry of all collections held in Greece, both analog and digital, that are of interest to humanities researchers. The collections contain a wide variety of items: archival collections, photographic or film collections, works of art, everyday artifacts, instruments, both musical and scientific, physical remains, architectural objects, etc. Currently, the database has over 5,500 records of collections. The descriptions are bilingual, Greek and English, and the record for each collection contains metadata on the collection's title, the holding organization, a description of its content, subject keywords, the size of the collection, types of items, the substratum for the analog collection or the format and metadata schema for the digital collection, ownership and access rights, spatial and temporal information on the collection's items, and access information, address for the physical collection or the URL for the digital one. Future plans include expanding the functionalities of the service with more advanced search options and personalized spaces where researchers can save search results. A more recent service is the development of a researchers community space. ORCA stands for Open Researchers Community for the Arts and Humanities. And for the time being, it is simply a space where one can locate researchers interested in specific fields of arts and humanities research and it provides links to the researchers' public information on their ORCID pages. Future plans include developing this section into a more interactive space with communication functionalities. Another key service of the DIAS, Daria GR DIAS, is the DIAS Thesaurus for the Humanities. It is created as a collaborative effort undertaken by the Academy of Athens, the University of Athens, and the Athens School of Fine Arts, with the use of Temas, an online tool developed by Force. It is maintained by the Academy of Athens. It's a multilingual and multidisciplinary thesaurus covering the following fields: anthropology and ethnography, art and history of arts, archaeology, classical studies, epigraphy, history and philosophy of sciences, linguistics, literary studies, history, musicology, numismatics, and theater studies. It is based, it is a specialist thesaurus, but it is based on the principles, methodology, and hierarchies of the BBT, about which in a bit. Now, I cannot stress too strongly that part of the work within Daria GRDS is aligned with the aims of Daria EU and carried out within specific working groups. I will give one example out of many of the work that is done in these working groups. The work undertaken by the Thesaurus Maintenance Working Group led to the designing and establishing of a meta-thesaurus for the humanities, the backbone thesaurus, alias BBT. Using the experience of the DIAS Humanities thesaurus enabled members of the working group to contribute to the methodology of the metadata thesaurus. That is a common schema that overarches specific thesauri and makes them interoperable without intervening into their specific terminology and structure. The BBT is the research outcome of the work undertaken by the Daria Thesaurus Maintenance Working Group in an effort to design and establish the BBT as a coherent, overarching thesaurus for the humanities, under which specialist thesauri and structured vocabularies used across scholarly communities can be aligned and form a thesaurus federation, its aims being that it enables cross-disciplinary resource discovery while ensuring compatibility with thesauri that cover highly specific scientific domains and areas of knowledge in development. The BBT makes use of a small number of top-level concepts that cover the needs of arts and humanities thesauri. The top-level concepts are developed by adequate abstraction from existing vocabularies that the group has access to, one of them being the DIAS Humanities thesaurus. This bottom-up approach has led to the definition of 10 facets. Facets are the most general concepts whose properties are then inherited by all narrower terms of each facet. The facets are further subdivided into an open number of hierarchies. So far, there are 20 hierarchies in the BBT. Under this small set of concepts and top terms, narrower terms from different thesauri can be effectively subsumed, providing a comprehensive first-level integration of terminologies. The BBT is a multilingual thesaurus, its content being available in English, French, German, and Greek. It has a logical, clear, and consistent structure, and it promotes objectivity and interdisciplinarity. That is, it enables cross-disciplinary resource discovery. It can thus provide solutions to several inconsistencies that have given a hard time to researchers, to curators, and data management specialists. Moving on to tools and services, I want to mention Temas, thesaurus management system, a tool developed by Forth, which was used by the As Humanities thesaurus. This tool is available in the infrastructure, as also are available other tools and services developed by the Athena Research Center, by Forth, and by EPICE. As I said, the merger of Daria Dias and Clarinel has resulted in a higher level infrastructure that facilitates cooperation among disciplines and institutions in ways that had not been anticipated a few years ago. Integrating access to resources and services via a common entry point is one of these initiatives. The new portal of the Bolognese infrastructure, developed and maintained by Athena Research Center, is a good illustration of this cooperation and this merger. Bolognese initiated a new approach to research infrastructures, that of developing thematic platforms. We are currently running a pilot project for a thematic platform on the 1940s in Greece. The aim being to integrate the metadata of 1940s related collections provided by a small number of institutions into a searchable catalog that will allow researchers and teachers to use the material for research and teaching projects. The project is run by the Academy of Athens, Athena, Forth, EPICE, and the School of Fine Arts. The institutions that have provided content, that is metadata, are the Academy of Athens, the Archives of Contemporary Social History, ASCII, the Army History Directorate, the Jewish Museum of Greece, the Historical Archive of the University of Athens, and the Gallery of the School of Fine Arts. Another thematic platform that we are planning to develop is one on the Greek War of Independence. In the current Bolognese project, we are conducting a preliminary study for the development of this platform. The development of the platform itself will be included in the next project of the Bolognese infrastructure. The study consists of the following phases: a field research that was based mainly on the VS Collections Registry that identified a large number of collections, both analog and digital, with material of relevance to the Greek War of Independence. A questionnaire distributed among researchers, academic, and collection holders in March and April that produced interesting results regarding the needs and aspirations of the community. And an expert forum organized at the Academy of Athens on the 7th and 8th of October that was attended by 13 speakers and 12 other participants. I would like to end with a quick reference to some of the other activities of the AS, and here we have a few snapshots of from talks, seminars, workshops, etc., that Daria Dias has held over the years. And a page from Nima, our blog on DH-related discussions, which also holds the monthly bulletin DH Trip. And this is how you can contact us and follow us. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katsiadaki. Our next speaker is Dr. Kostas Papadopoulos. Dr. Papadopoulos is an assistant professor in digital humanities and cultural studies at Maastricht University. His research spans the development of virtual worlds to interpret societies of the past, to the application of computational imaging to analyze material culture, to the use of digital ethnographic methods to evaluate digital pedagogy and interactive teaching methods. Today, he will present participatory and socially engaged research. So, Dr. Papadopoulos, please.
So hello everyone, I hope you can see my PowerPoint. Yeah, good. So thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this conference. And I would also like to particularly thank Tanya Yagaki, who I know since the early 2000s when I was a student at the University of Crete. And of course, let me congratulate you about how much you have achieved with what I consider to be very little money for digital humanities research. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about a very different type of network, a network that we create with the public while doing our research or after we have completed it. And I would like to start by saying that the perception of the humanities researcher persists as hidden in the library or in the office surrounded by books. The images of an isolated scholar disconnected from the public and from contemporary societal concerns. And while much important research in the humanities is carried out in an isolation that provides the necessary environment for insight and reflection, research in the humanities is increasingly carried out collaboratively within transdisciplinary settings with the public as co-creators. And I chose the word engagement for this presentation since it allows for a recognition of how the humanities do make a difference in society. And this making of a difference cannot be fully captured via the more established concept of impact, because impact tends to focus on a predefined end result and presupposes a linear relationship between research input and societal output. So engaged and engaging humanities research is increasingly being viewed as a form of an antidote for the decades-old and incredibly persistent crisis of the humanities. So in this presentation, I would like to argue that the humanities still have a critical role to play in our society, and socially engaged research can demonstrate its value and have an impact on people's lives. Socially engaged research is about scholarship reaching out beyond our peers, not as dissemination, for example, giving talks to the public or doing radio interviews, but as a public good, reflecting on an older mission of the university, that of making a cultural and societal contribution in terms of a public sphere. So the project that I'm going to talk about is History in a Box. And History in a Box is a technology-enabled team-based inquiry activity designed originally for secondary school students in Ireland. So we leave Greece for now. But then it was also repurposed for intergenerational groups and seniors. The content of History in a Box was based on research that was done as part of another project, Contested Memories, the Battle of Munster Bridge, which is a 3D reconstruction of a key battle during the Irish Sister Rising of 1916. And a goal of this project was to leverage phenomenologies of time and space as afforded by virtual world technologies to provide new insights and help to answer intractable questions about how the battle unfolded. So this 3D reconstruction, in a way, helped us to get a greater insight into how only 17 Irish volunteers, Irish soldiers of very young age, how they managed to hold 1,750 British soldiers for the better part of the day, and which actually accounted for almost half of the British casualties of this week-long engagement. So the Battle of Munster Bridge is one of the first that widely documents urban warfare. At the time, no army received training for this type of engagement. They were all being trained for field fighting on the Western Front. So in order to address these questions and to inform our decision-making process for building this virtual environment, we employed a wide range of research methods, but quite traditional in this kind of, in humanities research. So conventional archival research, we work with military historians to document the different sources. We even did kind of controlled experiments with period guns. We visited the battlefield, which is only just a suburban area in Dublin. But even with the amount of information gathered for the project, the temporal dimension of the battle was and remains very problematic, because all those sources give some indication about the sequence of events. For example, we know that one house was attacked after another. They're rarely clear about the time that a particular event took place. And they're also very contradictory. So a significant aspect of this research was devoted into evaluating different accounts and problematizing their reliability in the process of reconstruction. And what I'm showing you here is that the virtual environment we built was framed within the context of a 3D scholarly edition, an online space where researchers or students could go to explore not only the environment in itself, but also the various sources that led us to make particular decisions and reach certain interpretations. So the renewed public interest in the commemoration of the Easter Rising 100 years after the event, and also the Irish National Educational Agenda that emphasized technologically driven blended learning applications as one of the key factors for enhancing students' digital literacy, provided us with an opportunity to open our academic research to a broader audience and repurpose the 3D reconstruction project into a problem-based learning activity for schools. So what you see here is History in a Box, which was originally conceived as a school activity for transition year. And transition year in Ireland is for students 15 to 16 years old, and it's an optional year during which students follow a more flexible curriculum that provides them with critical thinking and problem-solving skills. So we were especially interested in providing opportunities for younger learners to learn about history using technologies beyond those that are web-based. And we also wanted to address the challenge of how technologies have shifted our attention from the physical to the digital space. The fact that our interactions with devices absorb attention and distract from physical experiences and social engagements. So by blending the physical and the digital, two modalities that complement and reinforce each other, History in a Box enables students to construct knowledge about the battle, seamlessly moving between the physical material and the digital. The digital was an augmented reality mobile application that provided them with tasks, hints, directions, and triggered digital content on the physical material they were provided with. And this was maps, photographs, letters, state records, even 3D printed buildings, and so forth. So physical interaction with objects has always been considered an effective methodology in stimulating curiosity and interest in the past, while encouraging social interaction and strengthening people's ability to make connection to the past using all their senses. And for this reason, as well as taking into account feedback from teachers in the beginning of the design cycle, especially regarding available resources in schools, things like Wi-Fi, availability of electronic devices, and so forth, we decided to use the concept of the handling box for our project. And I will be brave enough. I'm going to show you a very quick video here. The idea is that everything comes in a box that includes all the necessary material for the students to explore the battle. So tablets, lesson folders, 3D printed models. And the mixed reality app enables a task-based exploration triggered by physical objects and primary sources, including photographs, witness statements, state records, and so forth. And these have a very central role in the lessons because students have to evaluate their content, their origins, authority, reliability, and so forth. And finally, through group work to form their own interpretations. And there's also augmented reality content like what you see here. For example, here they have to evaluate the lines of sight from the buildings they were occupied, and also they have to complete certain tasks, filling in work seats, and so forth. And the whole idea is that the class is divided into 5 groups, and each group works on a particular topic. You see here some examples like local population, the hospital, the buildings, and so forth. And the app also includes multimedia content, interviews with historians, audio footage from eyewitnesses and people involved in the battle recorded in the 1960s, footage from our virtual world, new footage that we produced, and so on and so forth. So history teaching in schools, at least in Ireland, and well, as far as I remember from my school years, also in Greece, is still dominated by lecturing, reliance on secondary literature, memorization of facts, and in a way, student expectation of a singular correct answer, even to the most complex research question. And the uncritical acceptance of facts and figures, singular perspectives, the lack of historical investigation, analysis, and interpretation, and the reproduction of information without understanding its origins makes students very passive consumers of knowledge without skills to critically evaluate information. And I think now more than ever, this has lifelong repercussions in an era of false news and fake facts. So in a way, our project, History in a Box, set out to counteract this. So the goal of History in a Box was not only to educate students about the facts of the battle, but also to provide an opportunity for teenagers to use devices they normally use for fun, as an educational tool, in essence giving them permission to focus on what is normally seen as a distraction in the classroom. And also, I think a seminal design feature of the project was to use technology to bring students back to primary sources to read the battle and its consequences more holistically, and learn about contradictions and ambiguity. And I think at the same time, it provided our team with the opportunity to leverage digital humanities research within a participatory engagement setting to reach out to second-level students and teachers to provide them with opportunities of engaging with cutting-edge technologies integrated into a student-led learning environment. So History in a Box was designed for both engagement and as participatory in its approach to development and testing, involving diverse stakeholders at different phases in a co-creation process. We followed an iterative design methodology during which focus groups with history teachers were carried out. Early versions of the technological prototype were completed and tested. We had evaluation sessions with secondary school students, history teachers, our own students at an undergraduate level, and so on and so forth. So we first started working with history teachers to co-design, evaluate, and refine the first prototype. We got some feedback, and based on our observations, we actually decided to rethink the whole thing and come up with another strategy in terms of both technology and content. And in the months that followed that very first design, we refined the prototype, and to be honest, we actually built it from scratch. And all the required materials were included in the app, and therefore there was no need for an internet connection to use it, because one of the feedback we got originally was that, yes, that's great, but we will not be able to use it in school because we don't have internet, or we don't have a stable internet connection. So each topic we designed was for a group of 5 students, so a total of 25 participants. Each person in the group takes a specific role: a reader, a note taker, a folder keeper, a presenter, and so forth. And the most demanding roles, like that of the note taker, could be shared by 2 people. And we decided to introduce roles to the project after the first rounds of testing, which showed that group dynamics led to some students dominating the activity and others stepping back in a way. So for each of these themes, we develop narratives that provide historical context, enable perspective taking, and allow affective connection, which are the three necessary components to develop some form of historical empathy. So our work followed the historical narrative inquiry model, which combines historical thinking, empathy, disciplined inquiry, and historical narrative theory, to infuse students with the ability to think critically and comparatively about historical interpretations, work with, analyze and evaluate primary sources in historical narratives, and also develop their own perspectives and articulate them through group tasks and activities. So History in a Box created an opportunity for students to not simply read the results of our research, but in a way to become researchers themselves, sleuthing through and analyzing the sources we used, actually, reflecting also on the fluidity, variability, and plurality of historical interpretations. So following from our experience with students, we decided to modify History in a Box for a family-based learning activity. So we based the reconfiguration of the activity on family, multi and intergenerational learning research that has shown that groups of people coming from different age groups, backgrounds, and experiences learn from one another by transferring knowledge, skills, competencies, norms, and values through processes such as observational learning, imitation, and modeling. So History in a Box was reconceived as a family-based activity and family very broadly conceived, in which each group of 5 students was replaced by one or more families consisting of at least a parent or a grandparent, a guardian or other relative, and a child or more children. And this allowed us to take advantage of family learning and the impact of knowledge co-production as an informal learning process. And also, to be honest, it provided a social opportunity for value to be created between generations. Again, we carried out lots of experiments and evaluation sessions. Here you can see only some of the feedback we received to our questionnaires, and also more qualitative feedback sessions we had. And I think particularly interesting were comments about the fact that the activity focused equally on the British and the Irish side, and that also provided glimpses to the past lives. So participant responses and our observations highlighted, I would say, the success of the activity in a family-based setting, probably beyond our expectations, especially given that this was not the audience it was originally designed for. And we didn't actually repurpose the content. So it seems that the success of this activity was because in the original project design, we did not oversimplify or sanitize the content, as we were committed to utilizing primary sources, which we presented as, researchers ourselves would find them. So this essentially requires students to analyze the source and discard any irrelevant information. So by not feeding the students answers, but providing a research environment like the ones we typically deal with as researchers, in which ambiguity and incomplete historical record are very common, participants followed the clues, discussed their significance, and embraced the opportunity we provided to form their opinions in a very collaborative, problem-based learning environment. So the engaged nature of the activity brought families as well as strangers together to share knowledge and allowed us to bring our research to a far wider audience. And I would say that this research, this engagement reflects an older mission of the university, that of making a cultural and societal contribution in terms of a public sphere, the place where open conversation and collaboration in a public space happen, where critiques are generated in pursuit of the public good. So just to conclude, the project, as it was reconceived for family-based learning, fulfilled in a way a dual goal. It provided us with the opportunity of reconceiving our research as a public good, not simply disseminating it beyond the traditional audience of academic research, so our peers, but also providing the opportunity for a wide range of individuals to become invested in our scholarship by a historical event that has been very significant in shaping the founding story of the Irish Free State. So the development of a technology-based app allowed us not only to provide new modalities for exploring a historical event, but also to promote and foster digital literacy. And it enables students to use the technologies that they typically use for pleasure in a learning environment, providing a glimpse into how we could, or probably how we should be developing learning materials for this generation to enjoy learning and co-creating knowledge in a kind of a mutually respectful environment with both their peers and their parents and grandparents. So History in a Box was designed to foster awareness and empathy, to provide a vehicle for the public to have the same opportunities for insights and discovery that researchers experience when engaging with primary sources, in a way that aha moment when the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. So ultimately, I think it also provided us with an experimental space for multimodal and multisensory storytelling, in which participants moved naturally between the physical and the digital, creating a safe space for the co-creation of their own meaning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Papadopoulos. And our next speaker is Dr. Manolis Patiniotis. Dr. Patiniotis is Professor of History of Science at the Department of History and Philosophy, Athens University. He participated in the construction of the digital libraries Ελληνομνήμων and Katoptron and the interactive research platform Mapping the Enlightenment. He is a founding member of the International Research Network, STEP, Science and Technology in the European Periphery. This evening, he will present History 2.0, the gamification of the past. Professor Patiniotis, please.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. I'm glad to be with you, and thank you to everybody who contributed to the organization of this conference. I want to say that I'll try to entertain Kostas Stambakis' skepticism, and additionally that I'm very glad that I speak just after Kostas Papadopoulos, and you'll see why. As Maria Cristina already mentioned, I come from the discipline of History of Science. In the course of this presentation, I will attempt to take advantage of this provenance to bring up some historiographical issues pertaining to the new affordances provided by digital history. Let me start with a bold statement. History is not only about what happened in the past, but also about what didn't finally happen, about events that were eventually flashed by the propulsion of historical movement. This class of events constitutes a kind of historical ghost, a spectral presence which, notwithstanding its crucial role in the course of things, is never or rarely included in the causal chains that bridge the present with the past. What is the nature of such events? They are mostly cancelled potentialities, incomplete projects, unfulfilled expectations, or simply and most commonly irrelevant factors. In History of Science, we have quite a few such instances. Until recently, it was deemed irrelevant to the mainstream historiography that Galileo, besides being a brilliant astronomer and physicist, also struggled to ascend the social hierarchy and secure his position in the patronage system of his time. It was also deemed irrelevant to the mainstream historiography the fact that Newton, besides being the father of Newtonian physics, was a renowned alchemist and a diligent student of the scriptures. Moreover, we only reluctantly touch upon his homosexuality, taking for granted that already in the 17th century, personal choices belonged to the private sphere and were irrelevant to the scientific work which lay in the public sphere. It was irrelevant that William Thomson, the founder of thermodynamics, was an Irish Presbyterian and that James Prescott Joule gave for the first time a comprehensive account of the principle of conservation of energy in a lecture delivered in St. Anne's Church School in Manchester. Unfulfilled expectations and incomplete projects too. One of the most significant philosophical projects of the mid-18th century was the attempt to reconcile Leibniz's metaphysics with Newton's mechanics. Marquis-Émilie du Châtelet, who led this project, was one of the most prominent mathematicians of her time. However, notwithstanding the huge influence the project exerted over various local expressions of the Enlightenment in Russia, German states, the Balkans, etc., it was historiographically annulled due to its deviation from the pragmatic character of the emerging science. Similar instances can be found in the early 20th century. The telling subtitle of a compilation published a few years ago in Greek is Electrical Cars, Wooden Airplanes, French Reactors, Women Computers, and refers to projects that were overridden by rational technological choices in consonance with the capitalist organization of production and society. Why such projects, ideas, and actors are important? Because the whole spectrum of unrealized, cancelled, and unfulfilled potentialities determines historical outcomes to the same extent that manifestly crucial events do. It is a truism that historical outcomes are multi-causal. It's not much of a truism, though, to state that many of these causes do not have a direct impact, but are factors that formed the general shape of things that made a particular outcome possible. And although such factors are inscribed in the core of historical movement, they form a kind of negative or transparent causality. The cancelled and the actualized potentialities are equal parts of historical reality, and we historians are actually unable to capture the general shape of things without giving a full account of both. Especially in history of science, things are serious. As scientific revolutions come over and again, the robust artifacts of human thought or art tend to break down, disclosing their internal constitution. Even worse, they tend to negotiate their position in the world by exposing and rearranging this constitution. Energy will never be persuasively stripped of force, and action at a distance will never denounce its mechanical origins. Each scientific concept or theory is actually a stratigraphy of historically contingent elements. It's not confined in the shiny outer layer that reflects the current status of science. Indeed, the outer layer is the historically contingent interface through which this thick assemblage interacts with the world. Cancelled potentialities are cancelled, not non-existent, and they continue to play their role in history, particularly in the crucial moments when theories and concepts renegotiate their status and placement in the emerging paradigms. How can we capture this transparent causality? Or better, how can we capture historical contingency, which is the result of multiple complex causalities that led the course of things? In history of science and technology, there is a widely accepted solution: by opening black boxes, which means by bringing unsung heroes to the foreground, by retrieving decisions and choices that remain hidden from common view in the lower strata of the artifacts, by reconstituting the extended networks wherein the agency of the actors was shaped and expressed. This is exactly where digital history comes into play, in my opinion. Maybe it's a bit of a rush to speak of digital history before we clear up the concept of digitality. But in the context of this short communication, we cannot afford the luxury of a long theoretical discussion. So let us try to proceed by taking the agreement in the use of terms for granted. How can digital history promote the retrieval of the past, and especially of those factors which, although shaped historical outcomes, are absent from the mainstream causal reconstructions of the past? I suggest that one crucial contribution of the digital mediation has to do with the transformation of the nature of and their relation with the archive. The last few years, there is an intense discussion among historians, archivists, and museologists focusing on the nature of historical documents and the new ways they can be classified and organized in order to become more eloquent. The transformation brought about by digital mediation concern three aspects of this process. One aspect has to do with the quantitative transformation of an established practice, database building. The use of digital means allows the building of huge databases, their functional interconnection, and the common use of metadata in the context of the so-called semantic web. I wish to underline the characterization quantitative. Things that we already did are now being done faster, more reliably, and more efficiently. But they are not new things as far as the habitus of the archive is concerned. This aspect is most closely associated with the domain of digital humanities. An additional element also closely associated to database building and also depicting a primarily quantitative transformation of the data gathering process is crowdsourcing. The other two aspects, however, are immanent to the digital. Archive2 is not a classified collection of historical documents anymore. It is a hypertext. An important consequence of the transition to the digital is that the local archive loses its specificity and its locality. The well-defined, protected, and often inaccessible individual collection becomes part of a bigger structure where it is in constant interaction with other units that mutually redefine their limits and subject matters. The meaning of the documents does not reside anymore in their particular nature, the dream of the positivist, or in the questions asked by historians, the dream of the relativist. In Archive2, the meaning of the documents arises from their interaction, their mutual signification, and their positioning in ever-growing semantic contexts. So, in a sense, positivism is re-established to the extent that the agency returns to the documents, only not to individual documents, but to metastable assemblages that emerge during historical research. But as we shall immediately see, this is actually the reason why relativism is re-established too. A hypertext is a fluid substance that always displays itself by means of a sample representing its potential and not its actual or definite content. We do not really read hypertexts. We simultaneously create and read them. This simultaneity is a radically new quality underpinning a new form of cultural experience. Already 20 years ago, Lev Manovich stressed the importance of a new practice as far as the digital space was concerned, navigation. It comes as no surprise that hypertext was one of his main inspirations, the other being gaming. No two people read the same text, and this assumption does not have to do with the postmodern emphasis on the creativity of the reader, but primarily with the literal sense that starting from the same initial conditions, readers may and actually do inscribe different trajectories in a virtual literary space. And this is achieved by means of navigation. Let us now think, what would it mean to perceive arXiv2 as a hypertext without defined limits? Historians used to ask questions, and the so-called new historiography insists that meaning was produced by means of the dialectical relationship between historians and the documents. Interrogation was signification. However, if it is true that historians interact with the archive through navigation, it might be the case that things have changed. Of course, navigation in the sense of exploration has always been an important aspect of historians' work, but digital navigation sets new challenges. It is not about finding, cross-checking, and combining, but about paving one's way in a pulsing body of evidence where the individual documents do not simply exist, but perform themselves according to the shifting relationships they develop with each other. So the archive becomes the place where the positivism of evidence meets the relativism of choice. Databases, hypertext, navigation. Put together, these three elements outline a new context for historical research. I cannot guarantee, of course, that this is the only possible description of digital history, but I am pretty sure that these elements and their combination form part of every possible description of the new ways of doing history. Something is missing, though. Which is the particular quality of the digital that ties these elements together so as to produce a radical transformation of the art of history? Strange as it may sound, this quality is virtuality. We are accustomed to associate the virtual with illusions produced by computers. The usual translation of the term into Greek, you all know, is ikonikos, denoting its relation with imaginary or invented situations. But it's not only a matter of translation. Long before the popularization of the term virtual reality by Jaron Lanier back in the psychedelic 80s, the term had been used by Antonin Artaud in a 1938 collection to describe the illusory nature of characters and objects in theater. And our contemporary applications of virtual reality aim at creating a dreamlike experience of a world that does not really exist, or is a simulation of an otherwise inaccessible condition. In all common uses of the word, virtual denotes a hereafter. In philosophy, however, things are different. Although we have no time to trace back the medieval etymology of the term, which associates virtual with virtuoso, capable, rather than with virtus, moral strength, we may appeal to Gilles Deleuze's project to retrieve Leibniz's concept of virtuality and give it a central position in his own philosophy. In the context of this philosophical project, the virtual acquires a positive value and is related with the notions of potentiality rather than with imagination or probability. It comes as no surprise that Pierre Levy, one of the earliest theorists of cyberculture, draws heavily on Deleuze to explore the nature of the digital virtuality. In his book, Qu'est-ce que le virtuel? He more or less describes the emerging digital condition as a new stage of virtualization in the history of humanity. The previous stages of virtualization that shaped human civilization were the emergence of language, the emergence of tools, and the emergence of institutions. The virtualization of the body, messages, and the economy, he remarks, referring to the various individual expressions of digitalization, illustrates a much more general contemporary trend towards virtuality. I believe we should consider this movement as the pursuit of a continuous process of hominization, anthropopoiesis. Our species is in fact constituted in and by virtualization. As a result, the mutation that is currently taking place can be interpreted as a resumption of humanity's drive toward self-creation. I should content myself with this very sketchy confirmation of the affirmative character of virtualization and promptly turn to the importance of this quality to historical studies. The processes described earlier as database building, dynamic reading of hypertext, and navigation through the virtual space of documents are moments of one and the same process, the reenactment of the past through the virtualization of the archive. Simply put, I claim that going digital in historical research means to increase the degrees of freedom of the documents by creating dynamic links among them, and to activate their agency by staging their interaction unrestricted by the actual historical outcome. The purpose of this enterprise is not to open black boxes or to find missing factors, but to reenact historical contingency itself. According to Deleuze, the opposite of the virtual is not the real, but the actual. And according to Levy, every particular actualization is one of the many possible solutions to the problem specified by the virtual. The reduction of a set of documents and evidence to their virtual status enables us to ask questions like how things might have been if, and receive answers in the form of alternative actualizations which are made possible thanks to digital means. This might be an especially productive way to bring forward the broad spectrum of unrealized, cancelled, and unfulfilled potentialities, actually much broader than the spectrum of direct causes that define particular historical outcomes. Or, to use the words of William Gibson, to pulp nodes of potentiality strung along lines that are histories of the happened, becoming the not yet. It becomes evident that the transition to digital history centers around the possibility of creating a virtual space where documents and historians will interact in new ways. The title of this communication refers to the gamification of the past, and it's not only an attempt to catch the attention of the audience. It is a rather literal invocation of a new cultural technology that may prove particularly pertinent to the new ways of doing history. I do not mean, of course, that we should be wasting our time devising imaginary context and exploring hypothetical scenarios. In fact, this has nothing to do with the virtual in the strict philosophical sense. The virtual is neither imaginary nor hypothetical. But I do mean that the reenactment of historical contingency might greatly profit from the expertise that has been acquired in an area where the handling of the virtual is the main stake. A direct consequence of the digital turn is a radical change of the character of history. As a form of cognitive representation of the world, history has long embraced the ideal of objectivity of scientific knowledge. Actually, throughout the 19th and the early 20th centuries, the discipline of history occupied a prominent position in the realm of positivism. But as a form of political discourse, history has also been pressed to get involved with action and thus to be exposed to the uncertainty of the incidental. The defense of theory against action defined to a great extent the character of academic history. However, the fight among the two has never ceased. I suggest that the digital turn may decisively affect this constitutional imbalance. The possibility of reactivating the past liberates historiography from the obsessive pursuit of objective knowledge, while at the same time brings forward the intensely and unavoidably political character of the cognitive enterprise. Thus, it should not be surprising that digital history has already been used by various disenfranchised groups to reclaim not their past or present, but the very trajectory that connects them and the alternative futures that may arise from it. Because, as William Gibson again notes, future is inherently plural. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manolis. And now we open our screens to discussion. The panelists can raise their hands, and you can write questions in the box, the Q&A box. I see no hands. Okay, Dr. Tabakis, yes.
I have a question for Kostas Papadopoulos, and especially about his connection of the practice of digital humanities with the engagement with the public. I thought the description of the actual production of this history of books was paradigmatic. I mean, it had almost everything. I would like to hear a bit more about his general views on how digital humanities engage non-experts. And I have a special affinity for this kind of work, because usually the main criticism, and this is something I have also received as a criticism in the past in my educational endeavors, is that when you have such a big commitment on time and let's say on money to spend, then you cannot but have an excellent response. And I would like your comment on this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Costa. I think it's a very interesting question, and I can disclose to you that you cannot imagine how little money this project cost. We did that with some, I mean, I can tell you, we got a very small grant of about 10,000 euros. But of course, the actual time that we invested in the project, I mean, I could tell you that this could be equal to like close to 100,000 euros in terms of, you know, resources, personal time, and so forth. So I would say probably it was mostly our own time investment and our own effort that created this interaction and interaction with the public and participation of different stakeholders. And I would say that in digital humanities, indeed, there is this criticism, especially in the context of crowdsourcing applications, especially because, well, quite often engagement with the public is kind of an afterthought. So we do our research now, well, let's see what we can do with the public. And, you know, the common criticism is that that's free labor. I think it's really valuable, and I can tell you that it was a very rewarding experience for myself and the project team, trying to develop a project together, essentially, with the public. And as I said, I didn't have much time to go through that you know, largely, but the History in a Box was kind of a side project on a much larger project, which was this virtual reconstruction of the battle. So this was a research project that was not public facing so much. It was mostly a 3D simulation to help us answer some research questions. So then it was that content that we already produced as part of that we kind of repurposed it. So if we had to build History in a Box from scratch, I can tell you that this would have been impossible in terms of resources with no funding.
More questions? I see no raised hand from the panelists, but also from the attendees. No question has been written in the box. I think this is a really difficult session. We have to reflect on all of this, on these relations, and we have to come back. If there are no questions, then I suggest that we take, according to our schedule, a half-an-hour break, and then we come back at 8 o'clock sharp. Do you agree that we come at 8 o'clock? And we have our guest speaker, Dr. Ian Johnson, at 8 o'clock. Does Dr. Johnson agrees with that?
Yeah, I can do it at 8. Yep.
So we can meet 8 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we take a break and we come back 8 o'clock.